Hi guys, in this video I'm going to go over the insert statement, update statement, delete statement in SQL Server and how to use them in VBA, and then how to use a store procedure in VBA, hopefully, if the video is not too long. Before we do that, go to excelvbasql.com, watch 20 hours of video and growing of free videos and become an expert at VBA. Put your email in here and I will email you for free videos, and contact me here. Okay, so in the last video, what we did is we created a table in SQL Server called people here, and we we were able to select things from that table by doing things like this: select ID, name, age, date from people. We also were able to insert and update and delete things. So if you don't know what these are, what these statements are, go watch that other video. Again, it's on Excel VBA SQL. It's the first video under the SQL lesson. Watch that one first because that's what you need to do this video. And we also saw in that video that when you use SQL Server and in VBA, you're using a ADO data object that uses a provider to connect to the data source. And we set up a record set and a connection and a command object, and we use that to set a connection equal to a new ODB connection, and then open the connection here using that provider up here. This is that old OLEDB provider, which when you use SQL is called SQL OLEDB.1. Integrated security is either SSPI. If you don't want to use that, you can put in username and password. Initial catalog is going to be the name of the table, the SQL table. This is the name of your SQL table, which in our case is my company. Or no, I'm sorry, this is the database. I'm sorry. My company is the name of the database. So initial catalog is the name of your database, and data source is your server. Okay, we saw that. We then set up a SQL statement as a string here. SQL as a string. We put a SQL statement in there. We declared a record set, and we set the record set to a new ADODB record set. We put the cursor location equal to the add use client, and then we open that record set. And here's the line where the data was thrown onto the record set, and we checked if the record set was blank, and then we put it on the worksheet and put the fields on the worksheet. So what we have is basically this: we have a VBA macro that, if I clear this out, if I run it, it'll show a message box that says the number of rows returned from the select statement is 1, and then it puts the data from the database right here. That's what we saw last time. It was a select statement that did exactly what you see here. Select this. It does exactly that, which is pretty cool. So now we're going to do this. We're going to try to insert stuff into the database. So let's start writing that code, and shouldn't be too difficult. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm just going to put a big comment here that this is the select statement, and then I'm going to copy this, go down, and I'm going to put insert statement. Okay, so now we could write our insert statement. So to do that, again, we're going to use this SQL variable, and what we're going to do is just insert into, well, actually I could just copy it from here. I could just copy exactly what I had in SQL right here, and insert into people, name, age, values. I'm going to put Bob. And Bob is going to be, what is age? 77. So there's my SQL statement. And now again, I can do cn.execute. Now notice that I didn't use cn.execute up here. Up here, when I wanted to return from the select statement, I did rs.open, and that opened a record set, and that, along with these parameters, the parameter was a SQL statement, the select statement, the connection string, and the cursor type, the locking type, and is it a command text or a stored procedure? This is a command text, so this is going to be ADCMD text. Here I didn't do cn.execute. Now notice when you select something, you're returning data. So you need a record set because you need something to hold that data. When you're inserting something, you don't need a record set. So you could just execute it and do it like this, SQL, and then you put comma, and here you see down here, records affected. This is going to be a parameter. I could put I'm naming a parameter now, number of rows affected. This will tell me the number of records affected. And so let me just declare that up here. I'm going to declare this dim number of rows affected as integer, and I can use that, as you just saw, when I execute this SQL statement right here, cn.execute. Now remember, what is cn? Cn is this connection up here that I opened. I opened this connection right here to the database. When you do cn.execute, you put the SQL statement, and then you put a variable that will hold the number of rows affected. Then you put some options here, and the options are ADCMD text, which says to the ADO object that is going to run into that is going to use the provider that, this ADO, let me just get out of it. This ADO object talks to this OLED provider. This ADO object talks to this OLED provider. If you didn't tell it that it was a AD command text, what does that stand for? It means a SQL statement. That's what it stands for. If you didn't tell it that it's just a SQL statement, it would have to take some time to figure it out. So doing it this way, by adding this extra parameter, notice that when you put comma, these are options. So this is an optional parameter. You don't need to tell it what kind of SQL statement you're running. Is it a SQL statement like this, or is it a store procedure? But when you do it, it makes your code faster. So that's why you do it. That's the whole point of me talking about it, is that putting it here makes it faster for the ADO object to talk to the provider, which makes it faster for you to get your data back. So that's why you do it. Okay, so now we can put a message box here that says number of rows inserted equals, and then I'm going to take this variable here. I'm going to take this variable, number of rows affected, and put it in the message box. Okay? So now that's it. I mean, that's all you need to do to insert something into a SQL Server database. You just write a SQL statement that says insert into, the name of the table, the field you want to insert into, the keyword values, and then the data that you actually want to insert. And then you put CN, and remember CN is the ADODB connection. that is the connection to the database using all of this. Initial catalog, this is the name of your database, data source is your server. You do cn.execute, the name of your SQL statement. Here is a variable that will hold the number of rows. So if I insert something here, the variable that number of rows affected is going to hold that number, whatever that number is. If I insert 1 row, it'll be 1. If I insert 1,000 rows, it'll say 1,000. So let's run this. And then this AD command text, you know what that is already. It just tells ADO, is it a SQL statement or a stored procedure? And then our message box. So let's run it. If we do run, number of rows returned from the select statement is 2. Number of rows inserted equals 1. Okay. So we just inserted a row. So now we should have 3 rows in our table. And let's check. If I do this, there's Bob, right there, 77. That Bob is right here, is what I inserted. So first I pulled everything from the table. Let's do it again. If I pull everything from the table, it says the number of rows returned from the select statement is 3. And there's my 3 rows. And there's Bob. And then it says the number of rows inserted is equal to 1. And I click OK. Okay, so that's an insert statement. Now let's do a update statement. And again, you probably know what's gonna be here. So it's gonna be exactly what you see here. The update statement, you can just grab it and you could take it and you could put it right in your VBA code. Update people, set the name equal to George, where ID is equal to 3. Now let's make this a little bit more dynamic. When I return rows from the table here, I can do something. I can maneuver over the record set to the very last record. So I can do rs.moveLast. This will bring me to the last row in the record set. So this will go to the last row of the record set. And now I can do this. I could do ID to update equal to rs.fields 0. And this is going to get the ID of the last row. And this ID to update is going to be an integer variable. Okay, so what's going on here? When I pull data back from this select statement right here, I'm basically running this exact same query right here. When I pull it back, I want to go to the very last row and get this ID 9 so that I can use it and update this name. So how do I get this ID 9? Well, it's really easy. You just use this rs move last. That goes to the last row. So that's going to go here. It goes to the last row of the record set. And now you need to get this field. You need to get the ID field for that row. And that is done right here by doing rs.fields 0. Now what is 0? Well, think about it. Fields is a collection. So all these fields here, ID, name, age, and date, these are the the collection of fields in the record set. And when you put 0, it goes to the first field. So that will give you 9. So when I run this, this ID to update is going to be 9. And I could use that in the update statement and say where ID is equal to ID to update. But I need a ampersand here. So now you're going to see what's happening here. If I run this, the number of rows returned is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 9 right here. I'm going to insert a row, but I'm still going to keep track of that 9. And I'm going to change that name to something else. It's George, right? I changed it to George. So if I run this now, the number of rows returned is 5. There you see that George is right there. And that George happened on this update statement. Okay. Yeah, I mean, or maybe I could do, yeah, I mean, that's what's going on, is that when you pull back this select statement, you're grabbing that ID so that you can use it elsewhere in this, and I'm using it in this update statement. And I guess maybe I should do this first. I should do the update first just to make it clear what's going on. So here I said the number of rows returned is 6 and number of rows returned is 1. This should say the number of rows updated. But you get what's going on here, right? I'm just dynamically putting a filter on which row I want to set the name George to. And I just showed you that to show you that all this can be made dynamic. Every bit of it can be made dynamic. So now let's do a delete statement. And here is our delete statement. So delete from people where, let's see, ID is greater than 6. I don't know. And again, you just do the same thing. You do cn.execute, which stands for connection.execute. Here, put in the SQL statement, the number of rows affected. This is going to be a variable. You know, the parameter here is records affected. What it's saying is you could pass in a variable, name it whatever you want. I named it this. You can name it whatever you want. But when you put something here, it's going to store the number of rows affected. Meaning number of rows affected, meaning were they deleted, were they updated, were they inserted? And again, let's see. So now let's take a look at our table. I'm just going to select everything from our table. We have 7 rows, and I'm going to delete everything with an ID greater than 6. So let's see if it works. I do number of rows returned from the select statement is 7. That's right. There it is. Number of rows updated is 1. Number of rows inserted is 1. Number of rows deleted is 7. So now if we do it again, we return 1 row. let's see. I'm just going to comment this out just so we can see that the delete statement is working. Oh, I guess we have to insert something. I'm not sure if that's I have to remove everything here, so let me clear the whole worksheet. I forgot to do this. Cells.select. Okay, so the number of rows initially is just 1. Then I insert a row, but then I delete a row. So I always have 1. It's always going to be 1 now because I'm always inserting, and here I insert something but then I delete it because this ID, and we could actually pause it here and you'll see. If I step through this and run it, right now what you see is this select statement. Actually, you see that because we are because we already were here. We inserted something, so now we're here, right? And I'll show you what's going to happen. Right now in the database, if we go to it, it has 2 rows, and this delete statement says delete from people where ID is greater than 6. Well, this ID is certainly greater than 6, so it's going to delete it. And if we run this, number of rows deleted is 1. And now if we look at our database, you know, we're out of the VBA code. If we look at the database, there's only 1 row. So the delete statement works. All that is pretty straightforward. Now you have an update statement. You have a insert statement. You have an update statement. You have insert, update, delete. You have a select statement up there. Okay, so now you have basically what you're able to do is all of this right now. And actually all of this. You can do 4 things right now in VBA using SQL Server. Any of these variables here, like Bob and 77, or name is equal to George, or ID is equal to 6, any of these variables can be dynamically set using variables. So I could declare, you know, var name is equal to Tom, and I could put Tom in here by doing this, var name. So if you want to alter any of your SQL statements in VBA, just put the parentheses, break up your SQL statement into parentheses like this, and then ampersand around the variables. So var name is equal to Tom, and I'll declare var name up here. I'll do dim var name as string, and there I go. Now I have a dynamic. I'm gonna comment out this delete statement because I want to see the rows now. So if I run this, let's see. Let me run that again and see what this error is. Invalid column name Tom. debug. Oh, this is a perfect error. I mean, sometimes I don't know how good these errors, I mean, they arise at just the right time. So what you need to know, if you're watching this, is that when you insert something, notice we put these little apostrophes around these texts. You need that around your variables. That's huge. So if I run it now, because I added these little apostrophes, I don't get the error and it works. And now if I run it, there's Tom. And if I run it again, there's another Tom. So you see that this is working, and that variable, that name Tom is coming from this right here, var name Tom. So you could see all this stuff can be set dynamically, and again, that's really big. Let's set this age thing dynamically. So var age is equal to 100. Now this, we're gonna run into a little error, but I'll show you. Okay, so now we set up an integer variable called var age. What did I set it up as? Var integer, var age. Yeah, var age. And what we can do is, instead of inserting 77, we could insert and var age. So let's run this and see if we get any errors, and I believe that we will. No, we didn't. Okay, so that worked. What I was worried about is that I would need to put a C string around this. Let me try to put, let's try to modify the date as well. So I'm going to put var date. And let's try to, now you know how to modify dynamically strings, integers, and dates. I'm going to put 1/1/2005. Let's see if we could get this to work. Okay, so we get an error here. And it's saying there are more columns in insert statement than values specified. That means there's something wrong with this statement right here. And I believe it's because we didn't put a comma here. You definitely need a comma. And so this is where it gets fun, is to build these SQL statements using variables and ampersands in VBA. It's not, you have to be very careful. But now I believe it worked. So if we select from here, or did it work? Let's try to put this around it. I don't think that worked. Let's put a breakpoint here and run it. There we go. If I execute this now, and I select from the table, I get my 2005. So initially I didn't get my 2005s. When you put dates, you need to have these ampersands around the dates. Okay? So that's why I didn't get that. But now you see, Here you could put in dates, you could put in age, you could put in names, you could put in numbers. You could do everything in VBA all through variables. These variables, you could use those variables in your SQL statements using these ampersands and breaking up your SQL statement using the parentheses, or not parentheses, the quotation marks. So that's huge because now you can do tons of things dynamically. You can loop through a million rows and you could insert all those million rows into a database, or you can loop through anything. I mean, now it becomes powerful because you can use variables in your statements. Okay, one last thing is, and this is probably the meat of the video, we saw that we could do select statements up here. You can do insert statements here, update statements here, delete statements. You can use all the variables in those statements, make it dynamic. Go ahead. Now let's use a stored procedure. A stored procedure. So now we're going to use a stored procedure that selects data. And what is a stored procedure? Well, I said in the first video that we can take any of these statements and just name them something, and we can call them, because sometimes in real life these statements get 300 lines or 500. I mean, they get huge. So how would you call them? Well, it's real easy. You do this in SQL Server. You do this: create proc, and then you put get people data. So this is going to be the name of my stored procedure, get people data. And then you put as, and let's pass in a parameter. I want this stored procedure to take a variable called ID that is an int, and I want it to do something. I want it to select let's do select all the fields from people where ID is greater than @ID. So this is a way of writing the stored procedure, and once you write it once, you don't have to write it anymore. If I do this, if I create this, what's going to happen is it's going to store it in this programmability folder called stored procedure, and it's there until I want to change it. I don't have to rewrite it. So if I execute this, it says command completed successfully. And now I can go into this stored, here's my database, my company. There's a folder called programmability. There's another folder in there called stored procedure. If I open that, here's my stored procedure called get people data. And then if I right click on it and go to script stored procedure as, and if you use this alter too, and if you click on new query editor, if you click on that, here you see what I just wrote. Microsoft SQL Server, this is exactly what I just wrote. Because I did create, it created it and put it right here. And when you want to view it, you can do what I just did. Remember, left or right click, script stored procedure as alter, and it'll open up a window like this, which is you're going to be able to see your stored procedure. And if you want, you could change things. I could remove this and I could just highlight it again and press F5, and it'll alter the stored procedure. Meaning it'll modify it or change it. So if you ever need to change anything like these names or anything like that, or the parameters here, you can do that by just highlighting this and click F5, and it'll go command completed successfully. Okay, so what does this stored procedure do? Well, I could show you by doing this. Now I can delete this. Well, actually, I'll just copy this. And remember, this procedure takes a parameter called ID. if I want to call it and run it, if I put 6 next to it and just highlight it and press F5, I get all the rows that are greater, that have an ID greater than 6. Notice that the last ID is 26. If I just do this, select star, meaning give me everything in the table, I see that there's an ID of 6, and then it starts at 18 and 19, 20, 25, 26. And why did it jump from 6 to 18? Well, that's because I have that auto identity specification on. If you don't know what that is, go watch the first video. I went over it more in depth. And SQL Server remembers when you delete stuff, because I deleted a bunch of rows. So go watch the first video if you don't know why it goes from 6 to 18. It's because of the identity specification. Okay, so basically this store procedure just returns all the rows where the ID field is greater than whatever I pass in. So if I pass in 21 and I run it, then I get 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. And that's my store procedure. And where's it stored? It's stored right here, get people data, in this store procedure folder. So I could delete all this. I can, close this. And now I have this bit of code that I can call that has a parameter. Notice, let me go back to it. This is key because I can pass in a parameter, right? So we have to do that in VBA. We have to somehow call that store procedure in VBA. And to do that, this is where we're going to use this command object up here, CMD object. It's declared as an ADODB command. And that command is going to allow us to use a store procedure. And the reason we use that is because we're able to create a parameter. So let's get moving on that. So we do set CMD obj equal to new ADODB dot command. And then we can do this, CMD obj dot active connection is going to be equal to CN. So this gives us the connection for our command. Now what is our command going to be? Well, we're going to have a command type. And our command type is equal to, so remember in all these videos, this video and the last video on SQL Server, we saw AD command text, CMD text. That's because we were using SQL text like this. Now we're going to use SQL store procedure. So we do this, AD CMD store procedure. Okay, now we want to give the command the name of the store procedure. And you do that in command text. And so you just do get people data. Get people data is the name of this store procedure, get people data. So there it is in SQL. Here it is in VBA. Now you do a parameter. So now you do set PRM equal to CMD obj dot create parameter. Now what is this parameter? Well, it's called ID. It's an integer. And it is a AD param input. So what is this line doing? It's saying our stored procedure uses a parameter, and the parameter is called ID, and it's an integer, and it's an input parameter. Well, that's all this line does. It says here's a parameter that I want to create. It's called ID here. It is a type of an integer here, and it is a input parameter here. And I stored it in this PRM object here. Now I can do this, CMD obj dot parameters dot append PRM. So now I'm appending this PRM, which is this thing here, to this object. So now I pass the parameter to that object. And now I set the value of that parameter. cmd obj dot parameters dot parameters id dot value is equal to, let's put 21. So I basically I want to mimic this get people data 21. I want to do that. I want to do exactly that. I want to get this bit of data. This right here will give me that. I pass in my parameter of 21 here by setting it up first. First I create it, then I append it to the CMD object. Then I set the value of 21. Okay, cool. Now I can set a record set. Set rs equal to new adodb dot record set. And if you're curious, why are we doing this again? Why are we doing a new record set? Well, all the way up here, the only other time we use record set in this subroutine is right here in the select statement. But it was important at the bottom to destroy it, so we destroyed it down here. Now we have to create it again, instantiate it again by doing this. Now we could do basically rs.cursorLocation, which is what we need to set, is equal to ad use client. This says who's managing the cursor. Is it ADO or is it SQL Server? And if you use ad use client, it's going to be ADO. Then you do rs.cursor type, and that is going to be equal to ad open static. Now before we used ad forward open forward only. Now we're using ad open static because I want to be able to read and write to this record set, and I'll show you why in a little bit. And then rs.lockType is equal to ad lock optimistic. And why are we doing this? Well, before we did ad forward only or something like that. Right here, ad open forward only, or lock read only. I'm sorry, ad lock read only. So before we had our cursor type was forward only and our lock type was lock read only. And that was because we didn't need to deal with the record set. I didn't want to change anything with the record set. I only wanted to read it. I didn't care about maneuvering back and forth over it. Now I'm going to worry about that, and I'll show you why in a second. But that's why I changed these to ad open static and ad lock type optimistic. And basically those are the only types you're going to use. You're going to use ad open static when you want to change stuff, ad open forward, open forward only when you don't want to read stuff and write stuff, and then lock optimistic when you want to change stuff instead of just reading it. Okay, so now we do rs.open and you do cmd obj. So right here, this executes the stored proc. Remember, this sets the lock type. This sets the cursor type, and this sets cursor location. ADO or server, where ADO is the add use client and server is add use server. This cursor type is, I don't know, how do you want to think of it? Is like the dynamics, like, you know, I guess you could think of this as how can the record set be maneuvered? Up here, we had it to add open forward only, and you could see that here. Add open forward only. That means, you know, again, this is probably the trickiest thing is this cursor type to understand is open forward only means it uses a forward only cursor identical to a static cursor, except that you can only scroll forward. So what does that mean? Well, that means when you want to maneuver over this record set, you need to do it somehow. And to do it somehow, they have these things called cursors. And the cursor tells you how you can maneuver over it. You can move over it forward only. This open static allows you to maneuver over it, and additions, changes, and deletions by other users are not visible. So that means, you know, while you're maneuvering over it, you're not going to see any changes that others might make. Whereas this dynamic does allow you to do that, allow you to see the changes. So that's trying to give you an intuitive understanding of what a cursor is. But basically it's saying, how do you want to move over the record set? And what happens as you move over it? Okay. Let's go back down here. So we're dealing with our store procedure. We have our command, which is going to be our store procedure here with our parameter. And then we set up a record set object. And now we execute the store procedure using this rs.open with just the name of the CMD object here. Notice that before we did rs.open, we passed in this long, all these parameters. But when you do a store procedure, it's much shorter. It's only looks like that. Okay. So now we want to do what we did before. If rs.eof, then else, and if. And again, we could just take our code here and I could just put it right here. But now here, instead of doing rs.eof, well, actually, yeah, you just do rs.eof. Okay, so now what do we want to do? Well, we want to do the same thing. We want to, just like we did before, put the data on the worksheet. We want to take the store procedure and put it on the worksheet. And what I'm going to do is, instead of putting it in A2, I'm going to put it in F over here in F. So I'm just going to copy this data here. And I'm going to bring it down here. And if there is something in that record set, then I'm going to go to F1 and I'm going to put in F1 the names of the fields in that record set. Basically the same thing I did in the first video. Here's my record set and here's all the fields in it. This is a collection. And for each QF, which is an object, for each object in that collection, I'm going to print the name in F1 and then G1 and H1 and so on. And then in F2, I'm going to copy the record set to the worksheet. And then I'm going to do what I did before as well. I'm going to do rs.close. And then I'm going to do set rs equal to nothing. Destroy the record set. Okay, so let's see if this works. Let's put a breakpoint here and run this. So here I've gotten to the point in the code where all this data on the worksheet came from the first select statement, which is up here. And if you don't know what this select statement is doing, like I said, go watch the first video because that's where this data comes from. After we selected that, we inserted stuff into the database. Well, first we updated some things, then we inserted into the database. And now we're using this store procedure that is going to call this getPeople store procedure with this parameter 21. And it's going to put the data in range F1. And if we run this, there is our store procedure that returns IDs greater than 21, which you can see here. It goes from 22 to 27. And notice, why does it go to 22 to 27? Well, all the IDs greater than 21 are 22 to 26 plus 27. Where did 27 come from? Well, 27 came from that update statement, the insert statement right here. So first we selected from the table. The biggest ID was 26. But when we inserted here, the biggest ID became 27. And now we selected from the table again using the store procedure, and it's 27 is the biggest ID. So that's why 27. Now the titles are moved over here, and I got to figure out why that is happening. That is happening because we have to set that call offset equal to 0 up here. So because we use call offset above in that first, we use it right here. We're using that variable call offset, but we never set it back to 0. So when we start offsetting, we go to F2, but call offset is already 4 because it was at like D, so it moved 4 over. So now let's run it because we reset the call offset to 0 right here. Now we can run this, and you see the message box is going, and now we have exactly what we want. We have a first select statement that goes to 27. It selects all the data, and then we insert a row in the database, and then we select the data from the database that's greater than ID 21 and put that on the worksheet using a store procedure. So this uses a SQL statement like selects blah blah blah, whereas this uses a store procedure. Two totally different things, and it's important to understand they're two totally different things because one uses this sort of syntax using a command object, and you populate the command type of ADM store procedure, and command text is the name of your store procedure, and then you create a parameter, you append that parameter to your command object, and you put the value for that parameter, and then you call the store procedure by doing this rs.open, by using this record set that you instantiate here and put all the properties of here. And then you do the same thing as the first select statement. You put the fields, query fields on the worksheet, and then you do this copy from record set and send the data to the worksheet, and then you close and destroy the record set. Okay. That is great. Now I want to show you one more thing before we end the video, and that is, maybe you're still confused about what this open static cursor does, right? So let's show you a quick example of what that is. So I'm going to put a comment here, and I'm going to go manipulate data in the record set in memory and in the database. I'll put exclamation mark. So you don't have to do this, but this shows you what this AD open static is doing. We're going to do a loop right now. It's going to be do while rs dot, or do while not rs dot eof, and then we do loop, and in the loop we do rs dot move next. Okay, so what does this loop do? Well, it just loops over every record in the record set while you're not at the last, while the rs.eof is not true, meaning you haven't traversed the whole record set. rs.eof means end of file, eof means end of file, which basically means, you can think of this. Here's a record set. EOF means there are no more rows to look at. So this loop, basically rs.move next. Notice that you can traverse a record set by doing move first, move last, move next, all kinds of stuff. If we do move next, we're just going to do this. We're going to start here, and we're going to go here to this row, and then to this row, and then to this row, and then to this row. And then when we get to the end of file, it knows that there are no more rows down here, so it will stop, and the loop will stop. So this loop will stop when it knows there's no more rows. What we want to do is I want to show you that if you do this, rs.fields1.value is equal to changed name, you're going to be manipulating data in the record set in the database. So if I stop this and we run this, right now on the worksheet, it selected everything from the database, and everything is Tom, or Bob, right? If you look at the database, if I select everything is Tom, or there's a Bob down there too. What I'm going to do now is for each record in that record set, I'm going to change the value of this first field. Notice here's my fields. They're indexed starting at 0. So ID is the 0 field, name is the first field, age is the second, date is the third. So if I do field parentheses 1, that's talking about this name field. And if I make the value equal to change name, and then I go to the next row and I keep doing that, watch what happens. If I select now, if I select this, actually let me put this here. And if let me just run this and make sure that it's working like it should. Okay. There you go. So you see this change name here. And what this did is my record set was the stored procedure that returned all IDs greater than 21. And you could see that here. All IDs with this change name are greater than 21. It basically took that record set, which is what I have highlighted, and it went down this name column and changed the value from Tom to change name because I did this right here. Fields 1.value equals change name. But notice on the worksheet it didn't put anything, right? Well, that's because, now this is kind of critical when you think about it. When you keep moving to the record through the record set, this record set, it doesn't have any rows in it because you've moved to the last one. It's empty. You moved and you moved and you moved. In order to get the full record set back, you have to go back to the first record. So you have to do this, rs.moveFirst. If you do this, move back to first. Now you're going to get stuff in the worksheet because now, okay, after this, you have an empty record set because you've moved past everything. But now when you move back, you're going to have a record set and you're going to put that on the worksheet. So if we run it now, there you go. Now you see a record set returned to your worksheet. And there you go. You have change name starting at 22 to 30. We inserted something in the VBA code, and then we returned the whole data, the whole table greater than 21, ID 21, using this here. So this is pretty interesting if you understand what is going on here. It sort of tells you that you're able to traverse a record set. This is traversing a record set. And this is using your cursor. Notice that if I go up here and I change this to 80 open forward only, this should still work. Let's see if it does. Yes, it still works. I can do that, but I'm going to change it back to static. What is it? 80 open static. If I change this one to 80 lock read only, watch what happens here though. Current record set does not support updating. Now why is that? I'm getting an error here because I'm trying to update this record set, trying to change the value here. Well, that's because I have this read only set. It's locked read only. That's why you need to change this to lock optimistic. Okay. If I wanted to change this record set to go from last to first, well then I couldn't use that forward only. That's why open static is, I think it's better because you can go forward and backwards. So let's run it one more time. It says there are 17 rows returned from the select statement. Number of rows updated is 1. Number of rows inserted is 1. And there's the change names. If we run it again, these two are from the time that we ran into some errors with the changing of those parameters. So if we run it again, they all have changed name and everything seems to be working. So it all works, right? I hope you see what's going on here. This is a SQL statement, a select statement that is a SQL statement. This is a stored procedure. In between, we have an insert statement, and in between, we also had a delete statement at one point that was doing some deleting. And there also is an update statement that is doing some updating. So to summarize this whole video, it sort of goes back to the first video, but I'll try to keep the summary brief this time. You're using ADO objects. It stands for ActiveX Data Objects. You need to use that because it's flexible. It's a great way to interact with these data sources. But ADO doesn't exactly go to the data source. There's something called an OLED provider. And it's really easy to use. You just set up a connection to use that, and you specify the provider, different types of providers, Access, SQL, worksheets. I'm not listing them here, but hopefully I'll put up some videos. But Google them if you're interested. You set a security. You could set a username and password. Your initial catalog is going to be your database name. Your data source is going to be your server name. When you do your SQL statements, you could put them like this as a string. And that's what we saw in the first select statement. You have to use properties like cursor locations of your record sets to decide who manages the cursor. Is it going to be your client or the server? Now, you don't need to think too much about this. Just put add use client. I think that works best. You could Google it if you want to learn more. When you do a SQL statement like this, you use rs.open and put these parameters here. Always check if your record set's empty by using .eof, end of file. It stands for end of file. When you want to put the fields of your data on the worksheet, do a for each and do rs.fields. For each QF object, this is a type object. Each QF in rs.fields, use that. When you want to put the record set on the worksheet, do copy from record set. When you want to get fields in your data set, you can move to a record by doing move last or move first or move next, and you could find that field by doing rs.field 0. Remember, the fields are indexed at 0, so that this is the 0th. This is 0th field. First field is name, second field is age, third field is date, 0th field is ID. You can do dynamic things in your SQL statements by using variables and using ampersands and breaking them up with the quotation marks. When you do an update or insert or delete, it's pretty simple to do just cn.execute with the SQL statement, the number of rows affected. That'll store the number of rows that are affected, and then whether it's a command or a stored procedure. So the update, insert, and delete are pretty straightforward. The stored procedure is a little bit more tricky. I used a command object and set up an active connection equal to cn. Then you set up a command type, which is, instead of cmd.text, adcmd.text, it's adcmd store procedure with the name of the store procedure. You have to set a parameter up if you have a parameter. If you don't have a parameter, you could just delete this and you don't have to worry about the parameters. But if you do have multiple parameters or one parameter, here's how you do that. Use a parameter. Then when you do the store procedure, again, you got to set your cursor type, cursor location, lock type, and set up run the store procedure this way, rs.open with the name. Again, check if your record set is end of file. Put the fields on the worksheet, and then copy it from the record set. And in between, if you want, you can manipulate the data in the record set by looping over it, using your cursor that you set up, and looping over the record set and changing fields or whatever. But notice that this changed the database. And then you always have to close your record set and destroy the record set. Now, one thing I didn't do is do this. You also have to close your connection and then destroy your connection. If you don't do that, things could become very slow because you have these connections sitting out there. Okay, guys, that was a long video. I mean, this whole topic of using SQL Server and VBA it is a long topic because it's not trivial. There's a lot of these objects you have to use that you're probably not familiar with. A lot of these properties, cursors, lock types, all these things that you're not familiar with. But I believe the two videos I put up, they go over, 80% of what you need to get going. Select statement, update statement, insert statement, delete statement, and how to use a store procedure. If you know those things, you're well on your way to doing some heavy lifting with VBA and SQL Server. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take this workbook with all this code, this working code that works and it connects to databases. And all you need to do is go to excelvbasql.com. I'm going to post the code, and you could download it. And all you need to do really is change your initial catalog here to your name of your database and then the server that your database is on. And if you're using SQL Server, this should work pretty easily. If you're using Access, I'll put up a video on that stuff, but I think you just need to change this provider and change the source and put the database in. But it's there for you to just download and make a couple changes and you should be ready to go. In the meantime, put your email here in this box and I'll send you an email when new videos go up, and contact me here if you have questions or comments or if you want to know how to do stuff. Until next video, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.